Welcome to Patchwork Quilts with Diane. My name's Diane and this is the Spring Equinox. So if you'd like to see how I designed this quilt, please continue watching. Well, I'm very excited about this one. I've really enjoyed making it. It's not complete. These are all partial blocks. Nothing is joined yet. It's not the whole quilt. Couldn't fit the whole quilt on. All the blocks are made though, so it's ready for construction. And a few of you lovely viewers have asked me how I design my quilts, and it's quite easy really. It looks complicated. People are scared about seam allowance and working out numbers and working out the maths of fitting blocks together, but this is a really simple way of making a quilt, and so I'm going to show you step by step how to do that. And here's my husband. Would you like to say hello? We'll take that as a no, shall we? It's quite camera shy. Okay, let's get back to this quilt and the design process. So, of course, every quilt starts with the germ of an idea, and this quilt design came from me just flicking through the calendar. I was looking to see what commitments I had for March, and I noticed it was the Spring Equinox, and it occurs every March, and it's the Spring Equinox in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the Autumnal Equinox in the Southern Hemisphere, so celebrations all round. But back to spring, we have had a dreadfully long winter. We haven't had any snow. Sometimes you have snow and that brightens up everything sparkly white, but we haven't had any of that. It's just been dull and grey and going on forever. But now spring is on its way. So it's time to do something cheerful. So once I thought, I might make a Spring Equinox quilt. And so, of course, it's the time of the year, isn't it? So I've got the radio on while I'm sewing, and La Primavera keeps coming on, Vivaldi, the Four Seasons. And I thought, that's a nice sounding quilt. Could make a nice bright quilt with all that lovely flowing movement. And then, as I was flicking through some art books, Botticelli's La Primavera came again because it's the time of year. And so that was the name. So I had the idea to do a Spring Equinox quilt, I had the feeling of movements from Vivaldi, and I had the colours, and they're beautiful. So now all I needed to do was get my high-tech designing equipment out and start to design it. And I'll show you everything you need. So buckle up, be prepared. It's really, really easy. And this is the equipment I use when I design a quilt. So I have a book, and the squares in this book are 7mm. I have a tin of colouring pencils, a ruler, a pen, pencil, sharpeners and erasers. And that's all you need. Each of these little squares represent 3 inches. So 24 is approximately 60.5 inches. And so what I've done is just pencil lined a square. So that will be 60.5 inches square. Of course, I can always add borders. I can add more height, more width. Each square that I add to that is an extra 2.5 inches. So that's how I would grow the quilt if I wanted it larger. And now I'm going to find the centre, and I'm going to start with my first block. And so I found the centre, so I've just crossed 2 pencil lines, and the first block I'm going to do, my central block, is going to be 6 squares by 6 squares. And so you can see that it's going to take up a good piece of the middle of the quilt, so it's got to be something eye-catching and in keeping with the theme. And that's the start of my 6 by 6 block. I knew I wanted to have some sort of sunburst effect in the centre of the quilt, so I've put that friendship star there, and I've added 4 little tulips in each corner, because to me spring is all about daffodils and tulips in the UK, and so now I want to try and play on that feeling of rotation, because these are sort of off centre, gives the feeling that it's turning. So I'd like to try and emphasise that. And so I'm looking at these quadrants. I've just got to fill in these 4 quadrants. Don't worry about sizes or seam allowances or anything like that. Just think about blocks. I'm not sure if you can see this, but I've put a faint line from the centre of that tulip and and took it out to the edge of the quilt. It misses the corner by 1 block, and that's what gives us the idea of it rotating. And so what I've done, if I pull back, is I've put in that 4 corners a 6x6 block again. The design I haven't yet decided on. And then in the centre of the quilt I've put a 4x4 block. Again, I haven't decided on the block design yet. The only thing I know is that I'm going to have these on-point squares in all of those to bring out that centre and to give it movement. I'm going to have lots of little pieces of gold in this quilt, but the rest of the design is still in its infancy. So I'll think about what designs I'm going to put in each block and then I'll get back to you. So my first step was to colour in that centre, the golden yellow, and then I put out these arrows. So they could be leaves because I want lots and lots of leaves in this. Then I thought, because of that line that joins, I'm working on that line. So this is slightly off centre, this 6x6 doesn't go into the corner, but that little corner, that tulip there of the centre, I could put another tulip in each of those corners. So we're having a little bit of a tulip chat, and I think that would look nice. I'm sure that's a thing, tulips chatting. I've got to say, this smells absolutely beautiful. Wish we had smelly vision. So I'm going to put tulips in all of the other 4 and then I'll make my next decision. And so I'm just looking to fill up the whole of this space with blocks. And now I've left these 4x4s alone yet. I haven't decided what to do with those. But working on that line, there is a 3x3 that I could slip into there and there, there and there. So there's 4 of those. And I've also just realised that in the gaps between, there's a 5x5 that's just appeared. So it's quite an organic way of designing a quilt. I'm just looking at the spaces that there are available. And really, even if I just had to fill a 3-inch square, there is something I could do with that, even if it was a tiny square within a square. There is always something to fill the space. So I'm going to mark in those 5x5 blocks next, and then I'll have a look at the rest of the gaps and see what else I can fill. So if you look closely in this corner, you can see there are 2 shoe flies blocks and a friendship star block, and that's because next to that 5x5 I can fit 3x3s in. I can actually fit 4 in, but I think I'm just going to do the 3 to start with, and then I'll have a look and see how that comes together. So when I'm talking about these blocks, it can be any block at all that you like. All you need to be thinking is, can you dissect it into multiples of 3? If that is what the squares in your design are representing, it could be 2.5-inch squares, it could be 4-inch, 5-inch, doesn't really matter, but it has to be consistent, obviously. So if you've got a favourite design that has a 3-inch by 6-inch, imagine that sliced down the middle and that being 2 of those squares. Well, in these 5x5 blocks now, I've put this snowball shape, and now I'm just going to put some of the tulip shapes in each corner. So they'll look like that. And now I'm going to start adding some colour, but I'm just looking at this friendship star, and I think I could put a nice little leaf with a little flower bud in each corner. So for design purposes, I'm just going to use a light green and a dark green to represent the greens in the quilt, and they could be all different ranges of greens when I actually come to put the quilt together. And now I'm going to go around this shoe fly, and I'm going to turn it into a churn dash and add a dark strip around that centre. And next to this variable star on the outside corner, there is to the right a 4x4 space, and in that one I'm just putting in this 8-pointed star. Well, I like the way those 8-pointed stars look in the 2 different greens. So they go on the right of that variable star. So on the left there was a 3x3 space, and I've just put another friendship star in there in the dark green. But if you look in each corner, I've just popped in a half square triangle. I'm going to put that in a lighter green, and I'll fill the spaces with those. So there's 4 of those. So I've just decided to put a square within the square of that little friendship star block. I have no idea what this would be called, but I'm sure someone somewhere has a name for it. And that's it with some colour in. And these half square triangles around the outside sort of give it some direction, motion. And now if I take you closer into this block, it's a 5x5 block, a snowball centre at the moment with these little odd shaped tulips maybe. What I've done is I've just put some of these little parallelograms around the outside of that square, again looking to create movement. Yeah, quite happy with that. So where the yellow on the friendship star points out in the centre, I followed that design with the dark green, and now next to the tulip side I will put a pale green. And on these corner blocks there is an area where there is no design because it steps in, and so I'm just going to put a pale green on that one side just so that there's some pattern going out to the border. So now there's nothing really I can do until I've decided on colours. Now stay with me for this next part. I will admit at first glance it looks really scary, but stay with me. I also have something else to show you, and it is the construction page. So if you just ignore all of that minute detail within each block and think of them as just the bigger blocks, that's the layout. So it's not that scary. And it's the next morning, and as you can see, I have added colour. It looks a little bit riotous, and lots of the individual block shapes have disappeared because I've only used a limited colour. But when I put the fabric together, they'll start to group together in little families. And I've also worked out the blocks and the quantity that you need, but my fabric has been selected. So let's have a look at the juicy part now. Let's have a look at the fabric that I chose. So there's a white tone on tone, and then there is various greens. So a nice selection to choose from there, and then some yellows. Again, the selection, there's some batik, there's a little bit of solid, and then there's some oranges, batiks. This fabric here is reading as red while I'm filming this at the moment, but it is an orange coral base. And then I have some more batiks, warmer tones. So that is the colour range that I'm going to use, and I think that looks quite spring-like. Well, it is for my garden because I have lots of daffodils and lots of red tulips in the spring. So it represents my garden. And there's the proof from my garden. Beautiful, beautiful. So I didn't use all of the fabrics that I've selected, but they were there in case I wanted to. So I've got to say, the design wall here has been really useful for this, looking at these small blocks, making them up as you go and seeing how the colour interacts and talk to one another. I haven't taken the plunge yet. That is actually the workings of another quilt, top secret quilt. I am filming it. I will share it with you when it's finished. It may or may not be a competition quilt, so I can't show you that until it's entered, just in case judges bias and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it has been useful on this occasion, I've got to say. So now I'm going to make the blocks, and I'll show you how I get on with that. And the first block I'm going to make, there is only one, and it's this centre block here. In the planning, I've called that one G. And now I'm going to put together the first block, the centre of the quilt, and I've got my half square triangles ready. And I've decided for the centre I will have orange, and then I will have some of the half square triangles pointing out in the bright yellow. Well, sometimes it's a good thing that I'm filming this as I go, because looking through the eye of this lens, I can see that that lime green and that bright acid yellow, there's not enough contrast. And so I'm just going to make some more blocks and substitute the lime green with this John Loudon cottage weave, so it's more of an olive green with a white leaf on. Well, I'm glad I noticed that because I think that works much better, and so I will sew those together and then I'll move on to the next round. And the outside row will fit like that, and that will be block G complete. And look how pretty that's come together. Good decision about that olive green, I think. And I really like the way those tulips are working. You can see the rotation, can't you now? And so I'm going to do the 4 corner blocks, block H, and I'm going to use the same colour tulips in that block, but I'm going to put a big bright yellow centre in that. Different from that yellow, but still a bright yellow centre and an orange middle. And that's block H, so there's 4 of those. And you can just see it's a 6 by 6, but there's an extra piece on the bottom there. And I shall use a paler green for that. I think I might use that acidy green that I'd originally chosen for the first block. I think that would look nice. Well, I've just prepared all the parts for these blocks and I wanted to show you them. The sun has just gone in, but a moment ago that was glowing, the centre of that block. And look how lovely that gold is against the white. Everything is really working well together. And that gold on the outside brings in the stamen in that little white daisy. So yeah, I am really pleased with the way this is looking. Oh, and I decided to use that lime green and this coral on the tulip. So it wasn't wasted from the last block. I'm going to sew these together now and I'll show you what that looks like. Well, today it's a really dull, overcast day and it's cold here in the UK. But look how that is shining. Okay, let's put the next layer on. And it all fits together like that. So you can see there's that one extra strip on the outside to the right. So I'll put those all together and that's the corner blocks complete. So that's G block and H block now complete. And now I'm going to move on to F block and I'll show you what that one looks like. And this is F block here. So it's got a spiral daisy in the centre and it has the 4 tulips on the outside. I'm creating those in an orange. And that's the plan for that. And I need 4 of those. And those are the blocks laid out for that. So that makes a nice contrast to the other 2 blocks. I'll sew those together and that's block F complete. And that's it with the other 2 blocks. So you can see there are connections with the deep red, but there's also an introduction of another new red in the centre. There's a batik and there's new orange. Those are batik as well. So what I'm trying to do is to use elements of the same fabric in each block so that when it's all put together, there's a harmony. And now I'm going to work on block B. So block B is in the top, the bottom, and the left and the right hand sides of the quilt. So it'll be quite impactful, I think. And that is B. So I'll put the fabrics together and I'll show you what that one looks like. And that's the block B pieces. So there's some dark green again and there is some batik with the golden yellow leaves in the centre. And that's a lovely little 4x4 block. And those red triangles meeting together give you the impression of movement again. And when I stand back, I can see those red triangles in the latest block. They seem to be rotating, as are the yellow ones in the block below. And then in the top right hand corner, that's the centre block of the quilt. That has the yellow triangles meeting. So you've got nice movement there. So the next 2 blocks I'm going to concentrate on are primarily light green and dark green with just a touch of yellow. And that'll give a little breathing space in the quilt. And the first one I'm going to tackle is block A, which is this little block here. And that's a selection of greens with a touch of gold. And you can just see in this top right hand corner there's an asterisk with 2 on. Although there are 4 blocks, 2 of them are only partially made. And that's the layout of the fabric for block A. So there's 4 in all, but 2 are complete and 2 are partial. Look how crisp and fresh that looks. And that's the partial block, so there are 2 of those. And I've arranged those blocks now in the order that they'll appear on the quilt, so you can see that we do need that little bit of green just to break up those dominant colours. So now I'm going to move from the centre block onto the right where the gap is and create the next block. And that is block C, and there are 4 of those. So the diagram looks like that, and as you can see there's another asterisk and 2 of those are partial blocks. And that's the fabric I selected for block C. So light and darks again, and there's a little golden centre in that one. And that's that little 3x3 block. So I've used the same light and dark with additional of a 3rd green in the centre. So there's 2 complete blocks and there's 2 partial blocks. So I'm pleased with the way that's looking. I think that green enables the eye to rest a little bit. And now I'm going to have some more green in the next block. And the next block I'm going to make is block E. So you've got 2 of those in each quadrant. So there's 8 in all, 6 are complete and 2 are partial blocks. And there's the reminder in the plan. And that's the fabric selection I've chosen for those 8 blocks. So that's the churn dash finished. So there are 6 complete blocks and then there are 2 partial blocks. And that's how those churn dash fit on the quilt. So you can see where the 2 churn dash are on the left, there's a gap. And that's the friendship star there. You can see I've just put a little detail in the corners of it. So I'm going to make that friendship star a bright yellow with an orange centre. And on the outside where that's green and red, I'm just going to put the 2 greens. So it's the same greens that's in this 8-pointed star, and I'm going to put those there, so it'll be the darker green and then the lime green on the outside, and there are 4 of those. So it's block D, and that's the details of the block, and as you can see there's a red asterisk there, so I'm going to make 2 complete blocks and 2 partial blocks. And that's the last of the blocks sewn, so there's 2 complete ones and 2 partial ones. And that's how those little friendship stars will fit into the whole of the quilt in the centre. Well, I think there is definite rotation in this quilt. It looks so spring-like, daffodils and tulips. So all the blocks are made now, or partially made, and the next step is construction. And I'll show you how I do that next week. And so if you're still with me, thanks very much for putting up with all that nonsense and having a little foray into the workings of my design mind. That's how it is. Like I say, it's not too difficult and you'll find your own way if you want to do it. And next week I will show you step by step how to construct that. Like I say, doing the partial blocks makes it much easier, and we'll have a look and see what the finished quilt looks like. So thanks again for watching. Take really good care of yourselves. Enjoy Mother's Day tomorrow if you're in the UK, and I will see you next week. Bye.